Are we on? Hello? Yeah, we are. Hi, Janice. All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. It's a February 4th, 2025 meeting of the Camden Select Board. Welcome to all you young people. Delighted to have you here. You can watch us on the web. We're streaming at youtube.com/Town of Camden, Maine. Or if you want to participate by Zoom, go to the town website and click on the Zoom button, and we will do our best to acknowledge you if you would like to participate in the conversation. So our first order of business is public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here who would like to comment on a non-agenda item? Commissioner Ratner, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Mark Ratner. For those of you who don't know me, I am the current County Commissioner for District 3, which includes Camden, Rockport, Hope, a bunch of other places. And I am going to give you some information that will hopefully influence your discussion at the end of the meeting today. There has been, for the longest time, there has been a problem with the Knox call center, which we're all aware of. We're all been horrified by. It was one of the main reasons I decided to run for the position of commissioner, to make sure that that situation was fixed and fixed perfectly, and so we can move on. I've been sworn in on January 9th. I've had numerous meetings. I've met with both your chief of police and fire chief for a number of meetings already. We've had a number of conversations. I can tell you, I'm restricted by some of the legalities, but I can tell you that we now have 2 new commissioners, a new administrator, and a new director of the call center that are all intent in getting it fixed as fast as possible. We've had untold meetings, conversation, phone calls in the last week. And the situation is in the middle of being fixed. And both Chief Harley and Chief Gagne are aware of what's been happening as much as I can legally tell them. But I'm of the opinion that the new people in the commission are not interested in providing a Band-Aid to fixing this problem, which has been done before, much to everybody's horror, but is actually making the changes that need to be done. And it's pursuing quickly. It's pursuing, the new director was out. He met with Chief Harley earlier today. He met with Waldo in case there's a situation where we need their help temporarily for fixing the situation. We've also been in discussions with the state about the problem. I will be going to the state with Director Brophy on Thursday morning to update them on the changes we're making. So we're as before, I don't think the commission was much engaged at all. We are very proactive now. And as a matter of fact, I don't ever remember a commissioner coming before the select board when I was a member of the select board for 6 years. So hopefully I will be here often. And now there's something I'm hopefully informing you that will get fixed. And then maybe the next time I'll come and be able to ask you for something. So that's any questions that I probably can't answer.
Are you going to stay for the discussion later on for the agenda?
I cannot. I have to actually go back to work. So I still have to make a living because as you all know, these are not high-paying jobs.
Right.
Well, you can always join us on Zoom, right?
Yeah. Thank you
You're welcome.
for your efforts, and
But
we really appreciate
we're involved in
keeping us apprised.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we would be more proactive. I've had numerous conversations today already with the 2 chiefs here, with Chief Whitetalk and Chief Peasley, and we'll continue those conversations. So they're up to date. As soon as I know something, they will know something.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner.
That's
Appreciate
what I
it.
can tell you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Anyone else have a comment on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we will go on to approval of the minutes from our January 21st meeting that were included in our packet. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add, edit, delete, alter?
Yeah, I have a small thing on line 43. There's a note that says, a request was made by McKellen that a digital version of the major report be posted, but there's no reference there, what major report about what. So if you would just say major report about the Curtis Island Foundation's work.
Maybe even a link to it.
We can do that now.
That's it.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ken. I might have caught that if I could turn my computer on. So
Any other concerns about the minutes?
motion to approve as amended or
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor? Any further discussion? No? All right, moving right along. Item 3 is an update on the Wabanaki signage project from Colton Butler and Mateo Jakes. There you go.
You guys can get to the mic, okay? Okay, perfect. You ready for me to pop?
Hello, our names are Mateo Jacques.
And Colton Butler. We are sixth graders at Camden Rockport Middle School.
Thank you so much for having us here to present to you this evening. We appreciate your time.
Last March, we proposed an idea to the Board of Selectmen encouraging the town to consider having Wabanaki signage in town. We recognize that some of you may already be familiar with this work, while others are hearing about it for the first time.
We will provide some background information and share an update on progress. Last year, our 5th grade class spent the fall exploring the history and culture of Wabanaki here in Maine. We researched a variety of topics that sparked our interest, connected with Wabanaki community members and experts, and created exhibits to help share stories we learned.
As we dove deeper into our studies, we questioned how Wabanaki are represented right here in our town. We felt towns in Maine, including Camden, could do a better job representing Wabanaki citizens. Our research led us to having the opportunity to present at last year's board meeting.
In our presentation, we shared our hopes to see signage placed at various locations around Camden that recognize Wabanaki, display the original names of places, acknowledge the land we are on, and help tell the full story of the Mid-Coast region.
We feel there are many benefits for having Wabanaki signage in town. They would inform locals and tourists about the history of the land.
Signs could inform others about how places were originally named.
Signs will support the Wabanaki nations and help them feel represented right here in our town.
People will take notice of the words and perhaps ask more about Maine's first people. These signs can strengthen our own community.
Signs could even encourage a collective responsibility for caring for our environment.
Camden could be the model for this necessary recognition and help pave the way for other communities to follow.
After our presentation, we were able to get help from volunteer Natalie Travia, a trustee of the Camden Public Library, to help move the project along by helping us coordinate meetings, connecting with the Wabanaki consultants, and setting goals.
Over the summer, we were invited to share our signage proposal with Legacy Rockport. They have expressed interest in supporting this work as well, including placing signage at Rockport Harbor. We invited Heather Morgan to join our project team. Heather is a historian and works at the Maine State Archives. She has helped to gather information on the town's historical perspectives.
In addition to Camden and Rockport, we are also hopeful to include Lincolnville with this project to connect this region as a whole.
In the past year, we had several meetings to discuss and plan how we would like to see this project move forward. In that time, we have been lucky enough to secure support from Wabanaki consultants and Penobscot tribal citizens. Gabe Paul, Penobscot National Language Coordinator, and James Francis, Penobscot Nation Director of Cultural and Historic Preservation. They have committed to this work, and we sincerely thank them for their willingness to work with us.
They have made multiple visits to the area to further understand themselves with this region. They traveled to different physical locations to really connect with this place to help their research work and to get to know us better.
They've met with the local community members, made visits to the Walsh History Center at the library, and toured the towns and harbors of Camden and Rockport, as well as the Maguntacook River watershed areas.
We would like to introduce two additional students. This is Whitley Palmer and Eve Sadie, who are current fifth graders at Camden Rockport Middle School. They have expressed interest in this work and will help us keep student voices engaged going forward. We will work as a student committee to assist where we are needed.
Hi, I am Whitley. And I'm Eve. We are excited to jump into this work and help support the signage project in town. As student voices, we hope to carry forth the work that needs to be done that will share Indigenous knowledge and help us learn more about the land we are on, recognize the people that came before us, and celebrate our communities joining together. We have also learned that Camden Public Library is committed to engage this project and has selected the space in the library's atrium that will be dedicated space for this project to be highlighted. They are working on a second-round grant application to the Institute of Museum and Library Services to further engage with the community and to address missing narratives about the history of the Wabanaki Nation in the Camden area.
The work that is happening now to complete the research to determine what stories each sign will tell, create artwork for the signs, and finalize the exact locations for the signs to go.
There is still a lot to do, and we will continue to keep you posted on our process. We hope that this project will amplify Wabanaki Nation stories, inform locals and tourists about the history of the land and how the places were originally named.
We also hope to strengthen the whole community by raising awareness of Wabanaki culture as it is today. We look forward to celebrating communities together as we amplify stories of Indigenous people.
Thank you for your time tonight and for your ongoing support.
And tell me your name?
I'm Heather Butler. I'm one of their teachers from last year, and I have like even Whitley this year, but Colton and Taylor are part of my class last year.
I am just,
It's
This
the
is-
handover process, right? We still have Colton and Mateo who'll be active as long as they can, but having two new students engaged. will be-
yeah. I am blown away. Not just for the depth of what you're doing, but how you're learning how to integrate different organizations and systems and kind of understanding how things get done. It's really remarkable, very impressive, great leadership, and you are dedicated and inspiring.
Thank you.
And let us know what we can do. What's next? What happens next?
I think Natalie has been a really great support for the moving the project along and keeping the link going as we're in school. And so I think the next is that we have Gabe and James that will be back in town to do more research to try to pull that together so we kind of know the next steps on what kind of language would go on a sign if there was a sign being put up. So, and then the library is in a big process of we're waiting for the grant to move forward, but that will be exciting if we can get that center set up.
So your funding source is a grant?
The grant for the library is the funding they're working on, hoping
Okay.
that the library will be funded, that particular project will be funded through a grant. Is what the
Okay.
goal would be for that particular part to have. They have some designated space that they want to be able to put up in the atrium there. And hopefully the funding will come through the money that's being, hopefully the grant.
And that would include the money that's needed to install the sign, design, build, and install
the
signs?
signage process, I think, I don't know if Audrey, you can speak to that a little bit. but-
Audrey, your microphone is.
So the town, I think you all remember when they presented last year, we committed to helping with the funding for the consultant as well as the signage itself. And I also think that Tom brought up a good point that there's a lot of local businesses that would like to participate. Just because, out of interest in the project, it's been really, inspiring to see students take the lead and, kind of figure out not just, how to move a project forward. And civic engagement side of it. So I think that, we can carve out a way for, any businesses who want to help get involved to participate as well.
Cool.
I think that's the piece they found as soon as they presented. They, did their project, they presented, they hoped for this, and then it kept unfolding over the summer. Legacy Rockport reached out. Like, there's definitely an interest in the area, it seems. So I think you kind of just helped open that can of worms of where people were already interested. So I think there's a lot of businesses that might be interested to pursue, follow through with it as well. So.
Any other comments from the board? Allison?
Yeah, thank you so much for actually following through with this too. Lots of people have had the idea that we should do better in this area, but as you can probably see, that actually taking the steps of figuring out what is going to go on the sign, who has to approve it, it's a little bit tiring, I'm sure you've realized, but it's been so fun to get to hear first you presenting to us last year, and then I'm in a couple of other groups. I'm the liaison to the Library Board of Trustees, and I'm on the Camden Rockport Historical Society Board. And so without me bringing up any of this, I've just been listening in these meetings to other people saying, oh, we met with this group of students, and there's this group doing this. And so far, every time I've suggested anything, they've said, oh, we already have that person involved. That person already came and spoke. So it's been really exciting to see how your interest is spreading to other groups who might not have done it on their own. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And there's nothing like kids going to the business owners. Have you thought about, are you guys going to actually do that? And
I think we'll see what the next step is, and that'll be probably in the process of being too. And I'm looking at Natalie because I know with the multiple steps that we have ahead, but
yeah, be great to have some signs outside too. Maybe.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, thank you so much, all of you, for coming.
Yeah, and also just want to say it again, thank you, Natalie, because without her helping to pull everything together, we might have lost momentum. So
Raise your hand,
much
Natalie.
appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. So on the consent, next item, I'll let the kids clear out while we do. Consent agenda is the renewal of the victualler and lodging licenses at 16 Bayview. And that's, clarify for me, so the consent agenda, we just consent, right?
Yep, unless we don't. And otherwise,
Do
we
we
can
see
move on, I think.
any objection to approving the renewal of the victualler and lodging licenses for 16 Bayview?
Well, my only question is this new that we don't actually see the license application as part of the agenda? Is that a new thing?
No, usually I put a form in there, but I didn't because it was just one. Usually I just give you a list of physical bunch. It tells you the codes and all the inspections.
You mean, is it new that it's a consent agenda item rather than an actual agenda item?
No,
Or
is it new that we have a consent agenda item without documentation supporting the agenda? I thought typically we usually would see the licenses that are to be presented in the consent agenda, that the packet, it should be, basically, that should be in with the meeting packet.
That you can do your due diligence ahead of time and then not need to talk about it yeah, that makes
That is
sense.
correct.
Yep.
Is there a reason why it wasn't this time? I don't know. It's a rhetorical
Yeah.
question, maybe.
Well, we will,
Are you asking for it to be?
yeah, I think
Wouldn't
it's,
it
I
should-
think
it
it's
should be.
advisable.
So let's take
that
it off
be-
the consent agenda and make it a,
Well, the point is that license is not in the packet.
right.
oh yeah, I know,
get
but the
that.
consent, so because we're having this discussion, it's not a consent agenda item
It's a
anymore.
discussion item.
We only leave it on there if no discussion is necessary. So
There we go.
So having the
So here we are.
license in the license application in the packet for us to review is.
Yeah, I
Preferable.
would think
I
any
would- I
consent
agree.
agenda item that you still have the documentation in front of you, even though the discussion may be brief.
and
Yeah.
you're probably would want it for a regular agenda item too.
Right. It should be there.
Yeah.
for us to review.
Right, so I think you can just say that are you not comfortable approving that tonight?
That's correct, because I don't know what it necessarily is, because it's just a one-line entry. Well, 16, obviously, we know what 16 Bayview is now that I'm thinking about it. But it just seems weird that we have an item that is an agenda item that isn't supported with documentation inside the meeting packet.
In fact, that's what makes the consent agenda go smoothly, is we've already seen the documentation and it's we just vote on it and move on.
Right, but nobody's disputing right now that it doesn't need to be a consent agenda item anymore, but do we want to, I personally, because it's a recurring item that only is, the state goes through their process as well. And as long as there haven't been any complaints and somebody can attest to the fact that it's gone through that process and there haven't been complaints, then I'm personally comfortable moving forward with it tonight, even without the documentation, but I agree it should be in there for the future, but I don't know that we need to hold it up for tonight.
What's the impact if we hold it up until we have the documentation that we can review?
So I don't know if we want
Is
to,
there anybody here from?
Chief Farley.
Go ahead.
I can tell you we've done that.
you gotta
On the microphone.
I can tell you that we've conducted their life safety code inspection and they're all good.
Yeah, it sets a weird precedent that, we approve things that we don't see.
Let's move it to the action items, I believe, and we can discuss
Okay,
it.
I don't think we're setting a precedent. I think it may have been an oversight and it's not going forward. We'll be sure that the documentation is there. We're not
Oh.
setting a precedent of not having the license to review. So we'll move it on and go on to item 5, which is public hearings for the town meeting warrant articles. And we do have Jeremy with lots of documentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me just close this. That's okay. There are 2 public hearings tonight. Both hearings went through the planning board process. The first one is a proposal by Borden Cottage, FHRE LLC. They submitted a zoning amendment request to amend chapter 290 8.5, which is the coastal residential district, B5C. And I drafted a memo for you. It's in your packet. There's just 2 very minor changes to the proposed zoning ordinance. And that is that the facility shall have a maximum of, instead of 12, they're requesting 18 beds in either single or double occupancy rooms. Currently, the existing language says 12 beds in single occupancy rooms. They're requesting 18 beds in single or double occupancy rooms. We discussed this a month or so ago. Planning board held a public hearing on it. They were in favor of it, had no issues. There was no public comment negative about it. No one came in support of it either. I will say in the 7 years since they've been operating, or maybe it's 8 years now, we've had no complaints about their facility. It's a private residential treatment facility. Just so you know, when people are in those facilities, they are covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act because they're in treatment for a disability. We have no issues, and that's what the request is. And Tom Rodman is here to speak to it if you'd like to hear from him. Again, I think Tom, maybe rather than me trying to express what you guys are wanting, why you're wanting to do, you can do that for the board.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here myself. I'd like to ask Allison, it's okay if I bring Allison. Allison Avery is our COO, and she sort of runs the business, and she can more accurately answer any questions you might have about it, or as to why we're doing it.
Sure.
Okay.
So I think Jeremy gave a good summary. We're just looking to increase our occupancy. The double occupancy in rooms would allow us to lower our daily rate, which would open up more opportunity for people to come into Borden for treatment. So it doesn't require any structural changes to the facility, with the exception of if we went into a double occupancy in one of our cottages, known as Penobscot Cottage, we would have to install a sprinkler system which we're prepared to do. But really, it's just a request to allow us to provide services for up to 18 people instead of 12 is the ask. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you.
I would also add that we have been working with them and the State Fire Marshal's office to make sure they're compliant with what they need to do, going from 12 to 18 and single or double occupancy.
So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor or in opposition to this change in the zoning? Seeing none. And no one on Zoom. Anyone on the board have a particular comment? No, go ahead.
I would just say that I think you've been a wonderful part of the community, and it's been such a good use of that property. I remember the discussion years ago, and I just want to thank you for sticking with it and making that happen, because if everything had continued as sort of the single family use for that property, it just would have benefited very few people. And it's been a really great thing for the community. Of course, there's been the no problems aspect of it, but I also think it's brought a lot of expertise into our community and some new community members who have a lot to offer. And I just think it's been great. And thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the board?
Yeah, I would add on Allison's. It's been a nice addition, a nice, quiet, but well placed and nice addition to our community. And I think that we're grateful to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Any other comments? Can I get a motion?
And the motion would be to move this to voters
Right.
in June.
To approve the language in the packet to go to the voters.
I would move that we move the proposed zoning amendments to the June town meeting warrant.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
We appreciate you. All right, and Jeremy,
Thank
you've
you all.
got one more for
Yep,
us?
no problem. Second one is, I briefly touched base with you on this one prior. This is an amendment to our accessory apartment definition. As you may recall, a whole host of amendments went to codify LD 2003. We got a grant actually from the state of $10,000 to move that through the process. The state was, I will say that the legislature, I think, really ran somewhat afoul of home rule on some of this stuff. But so to entice municipalities to force them to do it, they gave municipalities a grant of $10,000 to do it. We ended up spending about $28,000 worth of staff time, board time, your time on these changes, and we had to send those to vote to the state after they were approved. We sent them to the state, and they came back and they said, "Great job, they look great, except one minor thing: you didn't include the minimum square footage requirement in accessory apartment." And there was some fuzzy language in the rules, and that's why we didn't do it, because the way that the state building code board, they referenced the state building code board, that they could change it in the future. And from our perspective, by including that in that way, having to come back to voters every time the state decides to change something like that is a little wonky. So we just didn't do it. And we knew our process for review, we wouldn't approve something at 190 square feet or less than that. And they said, yeah, that doesn't work. And I said, really? And they said, well, you can keep it as is, but you'll have to send the $10,000 back, if you can believe that. Really blew my mind. So we held a hearing on it. We just added some very minor language, added an and the new definition adds C, which is an accessory apartment must meet a minimum size of 190 square feet If the Technical Building Codes and Standards Board under Title 10, Section 9722 adopts a different minimum size, that standard shall apply. That's what we changed it to. Planning Board held a hearing on it. They had no issues. No one came out in opposition. And so we're just going to send this to voters in June to change that. That's all.
Based on what you know about what's out there for rental properties, will this affect anybody by going to 190 square feet?
I
That you
mean,
know of?
No, I mean,
I know it's small.
that's a small space. I can't fathom anyone would live in a dwelling unit that's 190 square feet. So no one's looking to do something smaller than that. When we do accessory apartments, we max them out at 600. So, I think the accessory apartments that we're seeing are about 600 square feet or slightly less.
And
no
this
issue.
language has the flexibility so that if the state makes
Correct.
another change, we
Correct.
don't have to go back in
Exactly.
and
Yep.
make another change.
Yep, it does.
Good thinking.
I would add that the State Land Use Planning Commission didn't include this language in their rules when they changed them.
They did or did
Did not.
not?
Did not.
So this also is a public hearing. Is there anyone here speaking in favor or in opposition to this article? Seeing none.
And again,
Any-
this is to
any
send
further-
it to voters in June.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Any further comments from the board?
Just a question out of curiosity. What if the application exceeds 600? What's the next level up? You have an accessory apartment. Is there another term?
No, I mean, we allow two-family homes, right? It just wouldn't be an accessory apartment. So accessory apartments cannot be short-term rented. That's one of the rules too. I don't have them all off the top of my head. But so someone can do in any zone, a single family or a two-family home that could be greater than 600 square feet. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Can I get a motion to move this forward to the June warrant?
I move that we move this forward to the June warrant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Boom, done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Select board reports. Should we start at this end? Ken?
Sure. I really enjoyed the toboggan festivals this weekend. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to you and Holly and Stuart and everybody involved. It was as usual a fun event. Meetings, the cemetery committee met last week, and they had a report from the GIS folks who displayed the GIS interface, which is not live yet. And they're going to finalize it and then bring it to us. They're apparently going to put all of the cemetery information, that is all the documentation about who is where and was related, that is currently in our cemetery database, and move it to the GIS database. And the other item on their agenda was budget. They are still working on the budget. They are going to finalize it, and their next meeting is a week from today, February 11th at 4 o'clock. And the only item on the agenda will be to talk about the cemetery budget. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Allison?
It's been budget season also for Mako Solid Waste. We voted on our annual budget last week. We're on year 5, I believe, of no increase to taxpayers. So that was good. We are holding steady with that. And there's still a little bit of money available. With a few years ago, we set aside a waste reduction reserve fund, taking some of the substantial savings that we had from sending our trash, unfortunately, to a landfill rather than a waste to energy facility, which is not necessarily the preferred method, but we saved at the time, it was about $100,000 a year, and then subsequently like $80,000 and $60,000 a year. And that was the difference between going to Eco Maine, which is the waste to energy facility in Portland, and the Crossroads landfill in Norwich Walk. And the reasons that we did that were twofold. One was that Eco Maine is actually really at capacity already in Portland and is further away from us. And so municipal contracts that go to Eco Maine really end up diverting commercial waste from that area to have to go somewhere else, usually the Crossroads landfill. And so for us to do that in the name of, being green, knowing that there's really no net benefit, actually there would be a net, the opposite of a benefit, because you're moving trash further away. So we took money from the savings and put it in a waste reduction reserve fund designed to try and support meaningful diversion activities. So we've done a few little small grants, but in this coming year, it looks like hopefully what we'll be able to do is take some of the relationships we've had from the past, which was actually, I won't get into the details, but we're going to have a waste audit, essentially, is the idea, and to identify additional things in the waste stream that are not being recycled right now, like things that are going into the landfill, especially lumber and other things, and then try to identify marketable items from that waste stream. So that's something to look for in the coming year, but other than that, a status quo, or I mean, that's just an aside. It's a status quo budget for the towns.
Thank you.
Tom, anything to report?
Nope, thank you.
And how about you, Chris?
Thank you. All I have to report are two things. One, the McGonagall River Citizens Advisory Group is working through their second draft of what they're going to propose. And two, it was nice the other day, I had an impromptu walk through with the Snow Bowl and the different things that are the needs at the Snow Bowl. And I appreciate that Jeff took the time for me to go up there. And it was also nice to speak to a few of the I can't remember the name of the business providing the
Side Country?
Side Country, yeah. They were there too, and it was nice to be able to talk to them. I hadn't been out for a while, so it was a beautiful day, and it was nice to have the tour of the needs. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I've been away, so didn't attend any meetings. However, thoroughly enjoyed being out at the Snow Bowl and the organization and the spirit, and I would like to take my hat off to my colleague Allison for her phenomenal drone photography. So interesting. The perspective that you give us on our community never ceases to amaze me, and I'm so impressed. And I again would just like to thank our first responders. We had an unfortunate incident in our neighborhood, and it was handled with grace and respect, and it never ceases to amaze me just how professional and competent our first responders are. So I am once again cheerleading for fire and police services in our community. Okay, now for our town manager's report.
So I only have a couple of things. We received bids for the Rawson Avenue Bridge. So not the bridge removal, which is going to be underway soon, but the actual bridge, which is our part of the project. And you'll get the tabulations next meeting and be asked to approve them. But very good news, the low bid was under budget. And I don't get to say that very often, so I wanted to bring it to all of you tonight. So the bridge removal is scheduled to begin in mid-February. They were talking around February 10th. They're there now doing some prep work. So that project is on schedule, and there will be a little bit more of a gap between when the bridge is removed and the new bridge is replaced, but it's still a fairly short time between the two. I just got a letter today from the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry about high to moderate brown-tail moth population being spotted when they do their aerial surveys. So that's something to look out for, because from mid-December to March is the best time if people are interested in this and you want to do a citizen science, where you go around and sort of observe. There's a link that we can post on our website where you can go and report if you see populations. So that just helps the state, figure out what the patterns are over time and how it, sort of relates to weather patterns and other just like ebb and flow of that population. We talked about this before the meeting started, but the Harbor Resiliency Project wrap-up is happening tomorrow night at Camden Public Library, and it's going to be from 4:30 to 6 p.m. So anybody who's interested in that project, that would be a good meeting to attend. And they have hybrid attendance options if you can't be there in person. And that's all I have.
Audra, just a quick question. I think you sent something out earlier about the Rawson Avenue Bridge. You mentioned it's going to be a short time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when about that bridge is going to be removed?
So they're going to start the removal on mid-February.
So a couple weeks.
Yes.
And
they're already there doing some sort of like prep work and stabilization work.
And when will a replacement bridge, do you think, be put
I
in place?
believe we're looking at like a June timeframe for that.
Good. Thank you.
In terms of the harbor resiliency, would the link for remote participation be through the library or the town?
Through the library. If it would be helpful, we can also post on our website.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
I think it already is actually on the town website.
Is it?
Yep. Oh, well, the calendar item is,
there
yeah,
a-
there's all the information.
There's a link there. Is that a Zoom
It might
link?
be a link first to the library and then to the,
Okay.
yeah, maybe it needs
Okay.
an
Just want to
updated
make
link.
sure people know where to look for that.
It says from 4 to 6. Oh, well, it says a couple different things.
Audra said 4:30 and the poster says 4:30. Our calendar says 4, so just take note that it's 4:30.
4:30. Okay. All right, on to item 8, action items. And the first one is the award of the Snowball Master Plan to SE Group. I think Jeff Nathan is here to present. Thank you.
And good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to talk with you about this tonight. I think as everyone's probably aware, we received a CORA grant, which is a Community Outdoor Recreation Assistance Program through the EDA. And we were awarded $160,000 for that. And largely, it's for the master planning at the Snow Bowl. We've awarded some of that grant already in two different tranches, one to OSI, and you may remember OSI, Outdoor Sports Institute, is working on the components that are specific to the new trail system that will be in existence at the Snow Bowl. So they're helping us with really end-to-end planning for that component of it. We also re-engaged Camoin, and Camoin is a group that we'd worked with back in 2014 when we commissioned an economic impact study. At that time, we were thinking about four-season activities at the Snow Bowl and the value that could bring. So we re-engaged with Camoin to really dust off that 2014 activity with the thought of, as we move more into in earnest into four-season planning, what that will mean for us. But we also knew that there was a piece of this really for the master plan of bringing everything together into one holistic plan of where we need to go from here. So working very closely with Jeremy, we sent out for our request for proposal to 4 different organizations. And we received 2 responses back. One of the responses we received back was from SE Group. If you're not familiar with SE Group, they are a leader in the industry in resort planning. Some of their clients include Gunstock Mountain in New Hampshire, Big Rock Ski Area in Mars Hill, Maine, Bridger Bowl Ski Area in Montana. And as far as multi-season resort activity, they've done planning for the Arizona Snow Bowl, Smuggler's Notch in Vermont, Stowe in Vermont, Vail, Colorado, and Whistler, British Columbia. And finally, first, what they've done from a strategic planning perspective, they've worked with Saddleback, with Killington, Vermont, and Bogus Basin. I pulled some of those out. There's probably 75 or so that they've shared with us of resorts that they've worked with successfully in this endeavor that we've looked to engage them with. Their original proposal came in actually more than we had funding for, and through a lot of dialogue and most importantly, the realization of all of the great work that the town has already completed and the Ragged Mountain Recreation Area has already completed in terms of planning and site mapping and the proposal for the new lodge. And so all of these components that already exist, we've been able to refine the scope and actually bring the cost associated with that statement of work down into something that fits well within the core grant that we received. So coming before you today to seek your approval to proceed with SE Group, to proceed with the master plan work. The intent of the work and the goal of the work is to be completed by June 30th of this year. So we have a really quick turnaround time in order to get this work completed. One of the things that was extremely important to us was community engagement. And so SE Group, part of that statement of work includes community engagement, where they will be on site, meeting with, holding public forums, meeting with the foundation, as well as other stakeholders within the area to make sure that we have input and not just this outside organization coming in and not really understanding the full breadth and scope of what we're intending to do here. So I'm excited about working with them. We've met with them several times through the course of kind of refining the statement of work. I have full confidence that they are going to be the right partner to work with on this. Many of you know Andy Shepard and have interacted with Andy. I'm excited to say that we've talked with Andy about continuing to support us, but on the client's side of this equation. Andy has worked with SE Group before in both up in Mars Hill as well as in Saddleback. So he's very familiar with the team there and the work that they do. And knowing Andy's expertise and all that he brings, I'm really excited to have him supporting us, but rather than producing a master plan for us, supporting us on the client side and allowing SE Group to actually produce the master plan. So I'm happy to field any questions you may have for me.
Why is it at the end of the vision being created that is when the first general community involvement sessions are? Why are those not more forward before a vision is created to find out from the general public about their interest?
Yeah.
Why is it, it's specifically noted in the thing, in the agreement that after the vision is made, then they'll discuss it for refinement. And it's actually after the vision is made and refined, then they'll discuss it with the public. And that just seems a little backwards. I know you mentioned the other groups that they'll be talking with, but.
Yeah, so the thought, and thanks for the question, Chris, but the thought process behind that is to have something both visually and structurally to share with the public early enough in the process so that if things need to shift, they can shift. But rather than sit down and talk about ideation, when we really have a pretty good sense of what Four Seasons looks like at the Snow Bowl today, and it's not without lack of input from constituents already and the community already. But the intent was to actually have something that people can visually see and can understand, and that has had some work behind it prior to engaging, rather than sitting down with a blank canvas and asking people to ideate without having anything in front of them to know directionally what's happening.
Can I just?
Sure, Peter.
Chris, the town was invited out to the snowball last
Hold on,
spring.
no, you-
Peter Lindquist, it's a great question you bring up, but we've been invited out to idea throw stuff on the chalkboard. OSI was there. I can't remember the guy's name.
Steve.
Yeah. So, and there were a lot of sticky notes up on the boards, and they were collected. Veman was, John Veman, Audra was there. So this has been invited many times. I just wanted to clarify that a little.
Good, thank you. I, in my discussion with Side Country Sports the other day, it just came up about trail access. And I don't know, this is probably maybe a Randy question or something else. Sorry, it's a little off the wall, but one of the things I hear about that would make it more usable is to have easier access trails to get to the various trail networks that we have, instead of having to go up the mountain and then down a trail that's a little difficult. And there used to be a road, I remember a long time ago, I think it's called the Dirt Road, on the other side of Hosmer Pond. Is that still Camden-owned dirt road, or did somebody buy that a few years ago that prohibits the use of an easy way to get to the other trail network?
I can answer some of this.
Okay.
So I believe that was always a private road. It's just that the people who lived on it were amenable to members of the public crossing through to get onto the Snow Bowl. That hasn't so much been the case over the past few years. So that's why that happened. However, there's some things changing, and I think that's going to open up some opportunities with all of that. That being said, a lot of the work that, Peter was just talking about with OSI, it speaks to exactly what you're saying, how there needs to be, trails for beginner levels and, some of the trails that we have and where they're located, really aren't appropriate for, sort of growing things the way that we'd like to out there. So Steve's recommendations, we've already seen a lot of that. It's really kind of reimagining the whole network of trails.
And is that really basically confined to the acreage around the mountain, or does that also take into consideration? I know there's been some discussion, and sorry if this is again not part of it, but I just want to find out. The access from town to the Snow Bowl as being part of the trail system. Is that part of the thought process, or is that just something else entirely? It's okay if it is. I just want to know.
Yeah, that is something else entirely, but not something that we haven't already started discussions about. And Pathways Committee, I've met with Jeff from the Pathways Committee. I think there's some, longer term possibilities there. And Chris, just to get back to your first question, the technology and I guess not even the technology, the engineering that's out there today, the ability to build more accessible climbing trails has come incredibly far. And, many of the new trail systems around the country are built specifically for the purpose of creating access for people who wouldn't necessarily have access through the use of really sophisticated engineered climbing trails that make it easier for people, make it more accessible for people. Part of what is important to me is that there is a more accessible way up the mountain. I've had several conversations with Ryan Gates of Coastal Mountain Land Trust about eventually the continuation of the Round the Mountain Trail through the Snow Bowl property, which will include 2 sections, one for winter travel and one for non-winter travel. But there's also that possibility of combining those efforts for accessibility onto those trails as well.
Super. I just think it would make it, you'd be able to sell or have the opportunities for a wider variety of people mountain biking specifically, with easier trails for people to
absolutely
do. I mean, it'd be a great destination and place to do it. I won't say I used to ride something over some of those. But yeah,
It's-
the more fun for the merrier.
It's trails, Chris, and it's signage.
Yep.
It's better marking on the trails we have today. And there's some things that we can do in the near term, as we're thinking about the master plan and the long-term plans. But there are ways that we can make the mountain more accessible even today.
Thank you.
Hey, Allison.
Hi. I do think Chris brings up some good points. It would be nice to see that access to the Snow Bowl incorporated somehow into strategic plan thinking, even just identifying in there, what has already been looked at or the fact that it's a goal, because how to get out to the Snow Bowl clearly fits into long-term strategic plan for the Snow Bowl. And I'm also wondering, is there any place already where kind of a summary of past planning efforts exists? I've found that sort of similar to what Chris is asking, like, when can we give our input? And I answer that question from people sometimes. And I sometimes pull up old Penn Bay pilot articles. I say, there's this and this happened and then this happened. And this is where we are with the, whatever happened with the redevelopment question. It would be great for me to be able to be like, you could
we
read
did
this.
have to pull this together, everything that you're talking about, when we prepared the RFP and when, they met with SE Group and talked about all the past planning that had been done. So I think it's really just a matter of us putting it in one location where everybody can find it, because it's really important for this project to remember all that work and incorporate it, because, there's a lot of great work that was done that it's really just sort of updating and building off from it. We're not creating a master plan out of whole cloth here. So I
There's
think
been
that
so much done.
there's so
Could
much
there be
done.
a history? I imagine there's going to be a document produced at the end of this, right?
Yes.
And so could there be a history section that just goes through the basics of the planning efforts before and what came out of that? And then just a little, like a timeline, just so people can be like, okay, this isn't the beginning. This is what we learned. This is what happened with that bond. Just the basic answer to the question of whatever happened to that snowball bond, whatever happened to the lodge that we were promised. It would just be really helpful to me to not have to do a research project every time. Because then it's, a little bit passes and I forget what did happen there. So anyway.
I think it's an excellent idea. To my knowledge, that summary doesn't exist today, but the information is there. So if you'll give me a little time, I'm happy to put that summary together for you.
I think those fifth graders might get on there. They were so good.
They were good.
Let's get them on
I mean,
that.
even just,
our eye on those.
2014, like what, there's been a lot and nothing happened that was nefarious in any way. I mean, that was the takeaway for me when I was on the budget committee and started learning about this. It was like, oh, lots of things happened. Lots of positive things did happen from the fundraising and from the town bond. A huge amount happened. And because of various things, that money didn't quite stretch far enough. And so now we're in a situation where we're figuring out, do we go this way or that way? So anyway, thank you. This sounds like just what we need.
Any further comments?
Jeff, I
Tom?
do have a question about the timeline for this, building this master plan. Is there anything stipulated in your agreement with SE Group or the organization?
Yeah, they're aware it is June 30th.
Okay, June 30th.
The completion
That's
date.
what I was, okay. Yeah, I
Oh.
missed that.
So, okay.
And then, of course, you'd take that master plan and create budgets with it and bring stuff forward.
Yeah, the intent is, once we have the master plan, is then to come back to the town in various forums and talk about what it is that we want to do and how do we get from here with the agreement and understanding of where we want to get to, of how do we get there. I think, certainly the Ragged Mountain Recreation Area Foundation will be a very important partner in all of this. The town will be extremely important, the public, the community, as well as the board. So really the intent is to have specific materials and visuals of what it would look like, and really be able then to take it to the public and say, this is what we want to do with a proposal of how we get there.
Okay, that's exciting. This summer even. That's
Yeah.
great.
Great.
Yep.
So I guess we need
Yeah, I
I'm
just
sorry,
want to
Ken,
add
go
also
ahead.
that I'm so happy to hear that you're going to refer to all of the previous ideas that have happened over the last decades, literally at the Snow Bowl, and maybe add to your list that there is a Hosmer Pond Association, and you'll want to be engaging with them as well.
Absolutely, Ken.
So I guess I would look for a motion to award the Snowball Master Plan to the SE Group.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, you have a grant and 106,000 of that grant is earmarked for the SE Group.
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct. All those in favor? Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff.
While Jeff is up there, is there stomach to go ahead and
I was just, to flip those two.
to put Pleasant Ridge as C and the amendment as B while he's here?
Right, I would,
Unless you
think
need a
that's,
moment to prepare.
I'm prepared.
if Pleasant Ridge will indulge us for a couple more minutes, we'll just address the fee amendment at the Snowball.
Great.
Anything more to say about, go ahead.
So this year, as you know, we introduced a new RFID system, and with that, some changes into our product offerings. Just as a reminder and to ground everybody, Wednesday, Camden residents still ski for free. That is unchanged in what we've done. And regarding season passes, Camden residents receive a discount on their season pass, both in the early bird rate and as well as the regular season rate. And that discount is anywhere between really 15 and almost 40%, depending on the type of pass that's purchased. So it's really intended to strike a balance, if you will, between being financially responsible to all of the Camden taxpayers, and make sure that we are still providing a benefit to those taxpayers that live in Camden that ski, and striking the balance between those two things. I've heard from a number of Camden residents about why we don't offer discounts on day tickets. Historically, there'd been a 2-hour Camden resident pass. Volume on it was very low. And it was very difficult for us to verify at the time who, in fact, was a Camden resident and who was not, that was using that particular pass. So, but taking a look at our full day tickets and our day tickets, there are really 4 places where I think we have an opportunity to extend a discount on the day tickets to Camden residents. And specifically on the weekday passes for the full day pass and the night pass. And the reason, there's 2 other passes, just so you know. There's a slipway pass, which is just for the magic carpet, and there's an uphill pass. I would not recommend that we do any discounts on those passes. Both of those passes are $10, which is a pretty low rate for any type of skiing, uphill or downhill, today's day and age. So I would not recommend any changes to those. However, a full day pass on the weekday is for a non-resident is $41 for an adult and $32 for youth. What I would recommend is that we offer a $35 and $27 pass respectively. The quick math would tell you that's a 15% discount on the day tickets. And then on night passes, we have a specific night pass. It's $29 for an adult and $25 for youth. I would recommend, again, a 15% discount, reducing them to $25 and $21 respectively. So those would be the weekday passes. A weekend pass, and which covers weekends, holidays, and vacation weeks, which is really that's the most valuable pass that we have. That's the one that is also the most expensive, which is $52 for an average citizen to ski on those days for an adult, and $45 for youth. A half-day pass is $48 on those days, and $36 for youth. What I would recommend, again, is a 15% reduction on those passes. So a full-day pass for a Camden resident would be $44 and $38 for a youth. And then for the half-day pass, $40 for a Camden resident adult and $30 for youth. Not recommending the 2-hour pass at this point due to the fact that it was low volume. And while there are people who I think historically did take advantage of that pass, logistically, it's a little bit of a challenge. And my preference would be to stay away from that at this point. But I would recommend those changes and out to our Camden residents. And as far as how we are looking right now, if you're looking at our revenue and expense line items, I wouldn't be here talking about discounted passes if we weren't in a good place at this point in the season. It's too early to say where the season will finish out, so I don't want to make any promises, but I am optimistically, I'm optimistic. I'll leave it there. I'm optimistic about how we're trending at this point.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Allison?
Just thank you for putting that together. I know that we are the ones who set the fee schedule to begin with, so it was funny to find myself frustrated the other day answering questions from somebody and saying, oh yeah, I think there's a Camden resident discount, only to discover that there wasn't in the day ticket category. And then, when the they is that didn't discount the tickets is you, I was like, oh, shoot. So I think that what you're proposing makes a lot of sense. And I'm very comfortable moving forward with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Chris?
A couple things. One, so we didn't have all we had before was the free 2-hour pass. Is that correct? We didn't have a discount before?
We did not have a discounted day ticket. We had Wednesday ski for free day.
And is Wednesday ski for free still going to continue?
Unless you tell me otherwise, my intent is still to have it continue.
Okay, so that doesn't affect that. That's good. And then do you know if other ski areas, like does Pleasant Mountain do this for people in Bridgeton or Saddleback for
not that I'm aware of.
Rangeley or?
They're not town owned though.
That's a good point. Are there any other town-owned ones, Herman? Are they town-owned?
No, we are super unique in the United States. I think there's one other one and it's like in the Midwest somewhere.
Oh, good. Well, I think it's in the, you're saying if they go for the other seasons pass, it's a 15 or 40%. And
yeah,
I get it that there'd be some sort of in a way, bulk discount if you're buying the premium package of a season ticket. So that sounds reasonable to me. It's nice that, yeah, sure, it'd be great if it was free for Camden people, but that's not realistic. So I appreciate a realistic approach.
Thank you.
Any more comments? Tom?
I think it's a good idea. I know that the residents of Camden are very invested in the snowball, and it's nice. It's nice for the snowball to recognize that. Thank you.
Yep. Ken, you're good? Good. All right. So I guess we need a motion to approve the discount schedule for the snowball day passes.
I'll make a motion to approve the mentioned discount. That's another thing that's the motion, but it would have been nice to have that in the packet too.
My apologies.
Right, it's hard to follow all of those.
Yeah, no, and that
breaks and the
was
discount.
my mistake. So what we can do, because I do think it'd be good for people to be able to refer back to it, so we can put something in the
Yeah.
packet and post it. So
Excellent.
you can all refer back to it
Appreciate
and
that.
send people to it.
So we have motion
Second.
Second, all those in favor, any further discussion? All those in favor? Excellent. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
All right, and thank you, Pleasant Ridge, for your patience. We will now go on to discussion of the Pleasant Ridge subdivision and acquisition of the stormwater. So here it's called the retention pond, and in your notes, it's called the detention pond. Which is it,
It's
Jeremy?
really the common parcel. It's an
Yeah,
entire
it's a
parcel
common
that we're
parcel.
getting.
But is it retention or detention?
I think it's a detention pond on the plan. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to
Take it away.
lead this here. We do have Michael Carita and Darby Uri who are on Zoom. They're both on the board of the HOA. Just a little background on this. Pleasant Ridge is a 59 lot subdivision that was approved in 5 phases, 59 lots over the course of, I think it started in 85 and finished in 95 or 84 and 95. To be honest, there's a lot of hindsight's 2020 on this one. I certainly wasn't here back in 85 or 95. And it was developed by Monroe Goodwin, has a site law permit with DEP. I did a memo for you, so hopefully you had a chance to read it. And I'm just going to try to summarize it. Has a site law permit with the Department of Environmental Protection and had subdivision approval, an amendment, an amendment, an amendment, and an amendment multiple times here. There are common lots. There's green space that's required. Certain percentage of a subdivision had to have green space under our subdivision ordinance. And what Monroe Goodwin, and I'm sorry if I'm going to talk bad about them and their development, how they laid this all out, but I'm going to. 59 lots, again. And what they did over time was, I'm just going to put it in simple terms, is you have 12 lots now that is in an HOA by themselves that are responsible for a detention pond that drains. Not every one of those 59 lots drains to this pond, but a great majority of them does. And then if you look at the subdivision map or the town tax map and our, on our map portal or whatever, you can see little fingers that go through the subdivision that all drain to this area, and they eventually drain to the town ditches. Now, the town accepted the roads. We accepted the ditches. So all that water is feeding down through people's backyards and sheet flowing off people's yards into the ditch lines. And they're in the ditches, and then they drain to a pipe. That pipe is actually right near Michael Carita's house. It's in between Michael and Darby's houses. So it goes from town water, right? It's town stormwater that we're managing. We pave the road, we maintain those ditches. All that water is running down into there. And then it outlets to this common lot that is owned by this 12 lot HOA that is responsible for the maintenance of that stormwater detention pond. It's really not a ideal setup at all. And what you find, and at some point we'll be talking about likely in the future, would be Lupin Terrace subdivision. That was a affordable housing project that in essence it did the same thing. It put the onus and the responsibility of all that stormwater on an HOA. HOAs are not designed for it. They don't have the technical ability. They don't have the understanding. And oftentimes they don't even know that they have this responsibility to maintain stormwater in a pond. So there's a long history, and I'll let Michael, and Michael's got a lot of history here. And I met Michael back in 2019 when the HOA at the time, this 12 lot HOA, was trying to sell off that common lot, which they were prohibited to do. They can't do that. Now, our subdivision rules and DEP rules contemplate and provide for stormwater detention lots like this and ponds to be owned by an HOA or to be transferred to a municipality, which is oftentimes what happens, not all the time. At the time, back in 2019, the HOA was Now, none of those HOA members are really involved anymore. I'm glad there was a coup over there, and I think some people left. But I'm just being honest. Michael approached me back in 2019 and said, hey, this HOA is in the process of trying to sell off this stormwater pond lot. It's large, it's almost 3 acres on a slope. Has a big stormwater pond down at the bottom near Washington Street with a outlet that goes across culvert underneath Washington Street. They can't do that, can they? And I said, no, they can't. The approvals don't allow them to. DEP doesn't allow that to happen. You can't sell it off. Our subdivision ordinance doesn't allow it. And they were trying to sell it off as a buildable lot. So at the time, Michael approached me and he approached the select board at the time and said, hey, is there any chance the town would be willing to take on the stormwater lot? It obviously makes a lot of sense from stormwater maintenance and management perspective. At the time, the select board, and Allison's the only one here that was on the board at the time, the board collectively, I think everyone was amenable to the idea and thought it was made sense. But there needed to be some maintenance done on the pond. There was alders growing up on the berms. There was alders growing up in the ponds itself. And so we met with Dave St. Laurent and I met with Michael. We also met with an engineer who looked at it. And we said, okay. And the select board said, take care of some things at the time, look at it and try to bring it up to a certain standard. And they did that. And that's where we are today. And maybe Michael and Darby, I'll let you guys jump in now because I think you guys have a good insight into what happened and where we are right now. And thank you for doing the work that you did and you promised you would do. So Michael and Darby, have at it, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jeremy. And really everyone, because this is an issue that could seem like a minor problem and just a one-off association problem, but I think it does reflect a wider concern for the watershed. Jeremy's recap is great, and I can't say enough about how much I appreciate. He did really great work. Audra, Jeannie Hollingsworth at the time, Bill Kelly, a lot of people put time into seeing the bigger picture here, which is, we don't need to relitigate, or I guess we can't relitigate all the stuff from the 80s, but we have this orphan lot where the town controls everything upstream, and there are a lot of lots, a lot of property upstream. If you look at the map, to Jeremy's point, you see how much water is coming right down, and then we have this little orphan parcel that we control, and then it goes directly into the river, and I mean directly into the river, right under, made ideally under, it has in the past apparently flooded too, so it can't go over a major road. As an association, we're, I think, down to 10 members now. I'll let Darby speak to that because there was some consolidation of lots, but we've put more than $15,000 into an engineering review, working with the town's guidance. We performed the maintenance, working with the town's guidance. But it doesn't change the reality of the problem, which is that the town owns the water upstream and downstream, and we have our truly precious river right below this pond. And the only thing we control in the middle is that orphan water. So even if you believe that a 10-member HOA is able to maintain a pond and a dam in the best interests of that river, we simply can't address anything long-term because drainage starts. I worked with, my wife and I hired Paul Gibbons to try to help us navigate this when we kind of threw ourselves on the grenade and promised to maintain this property as green space. And then it turned out, it couldn't be transferred to us or anyone else, let alone for a buildable lot. But the town manages the upstream and the downstream, and the HOA is trapped between easements. And on a bigger picture, we've all seen the intense rains and flooding locally, but also, Western Maine and Vermont in the past couple of years. And, frankly, we do not have the expertise to protect the river and the town the way they should be protected. You could ask my wife if she sees me carrying a shovel toward any problem, no matter my intentions, I'm likely to make the problem worse. And I appreciate that Jeremy has taken that to heart. And also Allison, McKellar, everyone has been really great to work with, honestly. So you want the right knowledge and resources in here. I do think a handful of homeowners has been really well-intentioned, but also, I mean, we've put money and effort into it, but it's also a reflection of the expertise we don't have. For example, we had a beaver dam in there a couple of years ago. The questions get to, I mean, it's almost like a sitcom. It's who do we call? What are we allowed to do with the beaver dam? And these things can sound small and almost comical until you consider the value of that river and that watershed to the town. So, we're asking for expertise and help and oversight. And I think, I can't say enough good things about the fact that Jeremy and Allison and others have hung in there and seen the big picture. And Darby, is there anything you want to add or anything that I'm missing?
I really appreciate the town's consideration of the issue. Jeremy has been great to work with. Allison and I have had discussions around this. We bought our lot back in the end of 2019 when the HOA had been contemplating selling this lot as potentially a buildable lot. There were so many machinations going on at that point about what the HOA was trying to do, and thankfully it didn't happen. Thankfully, the Caritas stepped in and purchased it didn't purchase it, but received the deed for it to make sure that nothing did happen on that lot. And now, the HOA has transferred that back, or the Caritas have transferred that back to the HOA. So it is where it should be, at least the way it was designed. But as you've heard from Jeremy, as well as Michael, and perhaps years in the past, the setup back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s for this large 59 lot development was highly flawed. And for the town back then to have allowed this, what is a 12 lot final phase of the subdivision, receive control of a detention pond system that essentially only one of those 12 lots feeds water into, it just doesn't make any sense. At this point, there are only 9 houses within the 12 lot subdivision. And there's only, in addition to the Caritas, 2 homeowners who have been around a long time to see the long history of this. The rest of the lots have changed over. And trying to get everybody up to speed on what our responsibilities are, what this engineering report from Gartley and Dorsey means, trying to get people on board to take care of the maintenance and the capital improvements that may need to happen, let alone just a beaver dam. It's a lot for this HOA, and trying to get new homeowners up to speed, get the buy-in on everything that needs to be done when they're not even feeding water into the system. It's been a struggle. So as president, it's, we got the Gartley and Dorsey report at a cost of $4,000 to $5,000. We have followed through with recommendations under that report at an expense of $10,000+ for 9 lot owners that are really taking care of a system that none of us really quite understand why it was assigned to us to begin with. So Michael makes great points about the water being under the control of the town before the ponds and under the control of the town after the ponds. So there's a lot of truth to that. We can't control what happens except for this pond system. And we sorely lack the expertise that's required to manage these. And it's quite cumbersome to have, the HOA set up when emergency situations happen. So, you know, if there's a beaver dam, if there's a significant other issue in the pond, you know, we have to follow bylaws to get to the point where we can start calling a meeting, raising money. You know, some people might not agree to contribute. We might have a failed vote on an emergency situation where there's differences of opinion. We might have to call in an engineer before we can settle those differences. The list goes on and on for the issues that happen within an HOA before problems can be potentially addressed. Right now, I can see the ponds from our house day in, day out. I watch them function. They are functioning with the work that we've put into them. The beaver dam is no longer an issue. So the ponds are in good shape. And, you know, at this point, the HOA is fully unanimous in its hope and wish that the town essentially rights a historical wrong here and takes ownership of the pond system so that it can be maintained appropriately now and into the future.
Okay, Darby, thank you. And Michael, thank you so much. I think it's abundantly clear that this is probably, I mean, we'll get the consensus of the board, but to take it into the town's scope, what are the implications for us in terms of managing, maintaining? Are there challenges? Are there issues that, you know, the protection of the water quality coming through there, is there any kind of mitigation that needs to happen in order for us to be responsibly handling this piece of property?
As it is right. Sorry, as it is right now, the ponds are functioning as designed, and they did the maintenance. You know, again, going back to 2019, we walked the site. Dave St. Laurent and I and an engineer walked the site, looked at everything, made some recommendations to the HOA. They did that. They hired an engineer. Engineer came up with the recommendations, and they did what the engineer asked.
I would say it's very strange the way that when there's a subdivision, stormwater is handled. It's unique from when a town sort of grows organically and the town takes over ownership of the stormwater system. When you have these subdivisions, and this isn't the only one in Camden, and this is not a unique problem to Camden. We have, you know, 3 that have similar problems to what Pleasant Ridge is experiencing. It's much more extreme here because of the, you know, the setup that Darby's talking about, where you have 57 lots and then the 12 unlucky ones at the very end of the line of development are the ones that are responsible for everything. But we've got this problem in other locations where the town has accepted the road infrastructure, but not the stormwater infrastructure. In every other respect, the way that we treat stormwater infrastructure is that it's a part of the road. Mm-hmm. And that's really how it should be here, because it primarily exists for road drainage purposes. Yes, there is some drainage to private property as well, but it's primarily part of the road network. So it's a very strange way of you know, kind of dealing with that crucial piece of infrastructure that, you know, really has sort of a broader public impact if it isn't managed properly. Mm-hmm. And more of an environmental impact than not managing your road, just the, you know, like surface of the road properly. So, you know, this is something that we're going to need to look at with a couple of other subdivisions. So I think that that's, you know, an important thing for the select board to keep in mind. But Michael and Darby are absolutely right. It's a lot to put on a homeowners association to manage, you know, a complicated piece of infrastructure where if you get it wrong, it has, you know, much more broad environmental impacts that affect the entire community. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they've done a really great job protecting that. They saw early on that if that lot was sold off and if it was developed and the rules weren't followed, it was going to have broader impacts on the town apart from just their subdivision. So they've really done a huge service to the community in taking responsibility for this and bringing it up to standard, like Jeremy was saying, to get to this point where, we can comfortably say that, the ongoing maintenance is something that the town can handle, and it's going to be less of a burden on taxpayers.
I would also add that there is a sewer easement that is on this parcel that runs up the side of this. There is access off of Washington Street. It's a unique property. It's not like, oftentimes you look at stormwater ponds and the properties are just kind of like, what it is, it's a stormwater pond. This one is almost 3 acres slope. It's got some access. It's kind of a unique site. And I think there's some public benefit to the lot too, not just in stormwater.
So my other 2 questions, will there be a cost to the town to acquire it? And will this need to go to the voters, or is this covered by our annual
No,
position of how does this,
there's no
what's the
cost
process?
for us to purchase it. And it would need to go to voters.
It would need to go to
Correct.
voters.
Yep.
And would we be able to pull that together for June, or would it have to wait
Yes.
until?
Yeah, we would. Bill Kelly's been looking at this and working with Darby. Darby's an attorney. And so they've been working on this. We've been looking at this for the last couple of months.
Okay. Other questions
preparation of
from the
this.
board? Allison?
No, just a comment that I had no idea what Jeremy was talking about back in 2019 when he was bringing this to us. And one thing he said back then was that, just in general, it's a poor practice for the town to accept a road without accepting the associated, not just stormwater infrastructure, so to speak, but the green space. I mean, when they put all of this together, the idea is that if you keep a certain amount of it green, then there's not as much of a stormwater problem. And that all goes with the roads and everything. And so that made a huge amount of sense to me. And I've been looking at things around town sort of through that lens. And I really think that we should be moving in the direction of trying to not just right this wrong, but a number of the other places. A lot of previous subdivisions have common parcels. Not all of them have stormwater infrastructure, so to speak, that needs to be maintained, but they're just common parcels that are not owned by anybody. You look in the GIS and it doesn't, it just says common lot. But as soon as the association doesn't have to meet for the purpose of maintaining a road, they cease to really have a reason to own things in common. And if you go to and ask anybody, like, oh, does your association do anything with this common lot? Most people have no idea what you're talking about. And that leads to this kind of thing where people get confused and they think something can be sold. And just the amount of time that it took, I know it sounded like a long explanation maybe that they give, but it wasn't, they didn't give the long version of the explanation. And they missed the entire ZBA hearings where we had to send them a notice of violation and prove that they weren't allowed to do what they did. And at that time, a bunch of residents in the area downstream came and talked about the concern about the amount of water that they see. And just for anybody that can't quite picture what a stormwater pond is supposed to do, it's supposed to be pretty much dry most of the time. And then as water comes into it, it slowly fills up and then is released slowly. The reason why Beaver Dam is a problem is because if you keep it full all the time, it loses its ability to slow anything down. And then what you'll see is that the field on the other side of of Washington Street, as this water goes through a culvert and then meanders its way down to the river, you'll start to see if too much water is coming down there too fast, it'll turn that all into a canyon. And we'll have the same situation that we do have over at Lupin Terrace. So we have, it's a unique situation here where Michael was willing to throw himself on the sword, so to speak, also becoming both the plaintiff and the defendant at one point, saying, no, don't sell it, I'll buy it. And then been working to, he's a writer too, so I'm sure he could write quite a novel about this, but it's been an opportunity for us to, I think, educate ourselves. I know for me, because normally what's going to happen is people just aren't going to care. It'll be like, okay, as soon as it's not my problem, let's just move on. They would have every reason right now to stop caring about this, but right now it's probably the best maintained stormwater pond we've got in the
For sure.
and all you really need to do is just cut the trees and keep the vegetation from getting out of control. And we have, as a town, we have multiple stormwater ponds at the Snow Bowl, and we have one at the transfer station. We have, we have the ability to pay attention to that.
Any other comments from the board?
In thinking about other subdivisions that have a detention or retention pond, I believe there's also now one at the Nordhaven place against Route 1. If the town goes ahead and purchases this particular lot for this particular subdivision, again, does it set a precedent that it's more likely that for the town to buy other lots that have
It's a good question.
retention ponds? Because this division maybe over at Nordhaven may grow from what it currently is to be 30 some odd things. And what are we saying, that we're always going to buy a retention pond?
I would say only if the town has accepted the roads. So once we've accepted the roads and they become public, it's protective of that infrastructure that we've committed to already to also maintain the stormwater well. I would say with something like Nordhaven, like a new development, my advice to you is always going to be, if it's a private road, it should stay private. We should take it on.
Absolutely.
That, like if it's private, it stays private, and that's their responsibility. And buyer beware, if you're going to buy in Nordhaven, you're taking care of the road, you're taking care of the stormwater. This is completely different, where, you have this connected infrastructure network that was kind of split in two, where the town, the roads are ours, the ditches, all the other stormwater conveyance is ours, but you got this pond.
But where it goes is yours.
Right. Yeah, that's your problem. Everything else is ours, though.
So as far as
my other question, Jeremy, thank you. That's good. How do we determine what the price is?
So
that the
we're not
town
going to buy
pays?
this.
Okay.
This is going to be given to us.
Okay.
And I will say, I'm just right, Darby and Michael.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just
That's
touching.
the way we tried to take it on, and yes, our understanding from Paul Gibbons and Bill Kelly was that it has to be maintained by either the town or an HOA.
Correct.
Period.
And
the proximity to the river on this one is, it is extraordinarily unique.
Yeah.
Well,
So I would say Nordhaven, again, I agree with Audra. I will say in that subdivision approval, though, I was here, and I think we have good precedents in how we're handling these things. This would be good precedent to buy or to take control over some of the other problem ones, like Lupin, and we have a Greenfield subdivision has a problem one.
Which
Those
we
are
already
problems.
took over. The voters
Which
already
technically
voted
we
to
already
take
took
that one
over that a number of years ago when voters approved to take that one. Nordhaven, though, during that subdivision approval, because it is private, the board made a condition of approval that they have to maintain that and provide us with stormwater maintenance reports every 5 years. So it is something that, the board and myself currently, we're not just ignoring this thing. It's like we approve it and they're done and they move on, and then people forget about stormwater. Nordhaven's required to provide us with stormwater maintenance reports every 5 years. And we're going to continue to do those things at the planning board level because it protects water quality. It's not just about public or private infrastructure. It's about what the water quality coming out of it. And the only way to do that is have someone maintain it. So we're going to do that. That's how we're handling Nordhaven. I hope this is precedent, though, setting for those other ones that are public, like Audra said, because it makes no sense to let that final outlet or where it goes to be the responsibility of an HOA that just doesn't have any idea of what it takes to do it. It was bad planning, bad permitting. I blame the planning board. I blame the DEP. host of people to blame on that.
I mean, it was very common practice at that time.
It was.
It's-
Oh, yeah.
And this
And
happened in
often-
communities all over the state.
Oftentimes what happens, I mean, I dealt with this a lot in Bangor. They're an MS4 up there, which is a type of permit that we need from the EPA up in Bangor. And so all those stormwater ponds, whether it's residential or commercial, same thing. And what they were doing is people were they would stop paying taxes on those lots. We have it set up a little differently here in Camden, and the mid-coast does it a little different, but people would stop paying taxes. And then so eventually the city of Bangor would just say, they haven't paid taxes in 5 years. We're going to take the lot and we're just going to start maintaining it, because they have to maintain water quality in their system and their drainage systems and their ditches, anything that gets into a river or stream. EPA's after them to maintain water quality. The only way to do that is for the municipality to actually take control and manage it.
Or send a notice of violation.
My question is financial impacts. I assume this will be mostly public works. Work. Any idea what those would be?
I mean, I've talked to Dave a little bit. Dave's supportive of this. He doesn't, I don't think it's going to be a costly endeavor. They've done the maintenance, the initial maintenance that was really required. And so I think it's really going to be up there maintaining and making sure that, you don't get the alders growing back up. It's clear right now. So I think it's an ongoing maintenance.
Okay.
Just like we have in our ditches, we don't let.
Whatever the drainage system is, that's adequate infrastructure and it'll last a long time, or does it occasionally have to be replaced?
I mean, occasionally you might have pipe that might be rotting, right? Like they used to use metal pipe, and the bottom of a metal pipe would rot out eventually at some point, but we didn't see that here. I don't believe that's an issue.
It might have to be one thing that has to happen is dredging every so often, because they're just like the catch basins that we're cleaning now, the stuff settles. And so.
Do we have the infrastructure at Public Works to do that ourselves, or is that something we'd have to contract?
And when Allison mentions dredging, it's really for like this case, it's not like dredging the harbor, right? It's like going in and removing material that's built up over time. And so that's with a small excavator to get in there.
That's something.
And we've got access right up to it.
And one question for Darby and Michael, and maybe your ears perked up the way mine did. Jeremy mentioned public access. How do you feel about that? Does that catch your attention at all? I mean, this is your neighborhood.
No, it's all going to be public, right?
There really is. The access is so conveniently built for the public. It's almost as if the property were designed for public oversight, and then the permitting lost track of that over time, is my perspective. I don't want to speak for Darby, but over the years, I spoke to the DEP, I spoke to numerous parties on this, and the only takeaway I heard over and over again was, we can't understand how this ever ended up in an HOA's hands. It is a very unique lot. You're not going to be coming off, and I'm one of, Darby's the other, the abutting parcel owners. You would not be creating any issues with private property owners that I can see. Am I wrong, Darby?
I don't see any issues there.
And
certainly.
So if it's something you couldn't access it vehicularly, like off of Goodwin, you'd
I'm
have
not
to
talking
be
about
down on
vehicles. I'm just
Washington.
talking about, I don't know if there's fish in the pond or whatnot, but if kids want to, or,
I'm sure there's frogs and
all
things like that.
Okay, sure.
Sure.
Sure. Does that become a public works, or is that at that point moved to Parks and Rec, or are we not even there yet to think?
Oh,
about
it would stay with Public Works.
Public Works, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be we're not just transferring the retention pond. Would be
The whole lot.
transferring the lot to the town. It'll be a town of Camden lot like any other. The public is free to walk, and maybe it will be a park someday with a little bench, and it actually is a nice
It is a nice spot.
It's
got access. There's, a curb cut already there. That's where the sewer line easement comes. There's a 30-foot wide sewer line easement that we already have on this lot. So that easement will really go away too.
So I had just a question about every subdivision is required to have green space. And thank you for clarifying the distinction between this particular lot with its very particular concerns. We're setting a precedent. Would there be any impulse for the town to acquire these green spaces under any other condition? Because the homeowners association or the subdivision association is formed knowing that they're responsible for the green space. And there should be no assumption that the town would ever
Yeah,
take over those.
Mike, I get your point. I agree and I hear you. I think, to be honest, I think when people buy into these, they really don't know or understand what it is that they're getting. They're buying a lot in an approved subdivision. And, on the subdivision plat, it shows, a drainage easement or open space that's might be, to the rear of their lot. They don't, I think they're just assuming it is what it is and it's going to be maintained by someone else. But in the fine print, it says it's that HOA. I mean, it's remarkable that over time, this one, it went from, again, HOAs and an association or approvals further up the watershed to eventually, Monroe Goodwin had it go from one HOA to another HOA to then ultimately, yep, you guys are the last 12. It's all on you. And so I don't think, the planning board should have caught that kind of stuff way back then. I think they would catch it today. I certainly think that.
Thanks. I think you've made a good case that this is a special circumstance and that there is a fairness, but beyond fairness, that we would be protecting Camden's interests.
Yeah, I think the public benefit here
Right.
is significant.
Yeah,
Some-
and
sometimes
just,
the-
I guess, because we're probably going to bring two others back that are similar to this. So I don't want to say that this is like the only one, but there are at least two more in town where it's a similar, not exactly the same circumstance, where there's, a broader public good in the town taking ownership of the stormwater infrastructure and some of the green space.
I will take those up when they
Yeah.
get here.
Yeah.
They're not
Sometimes
ready yet.
They're
green
not ready
space-
at all for this type of scenario. I mean, they're significant. Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the one at Lupin Terrace is a significant problem and is a massive erosion problem. When Allison mentioned, I don't know,
Turns the
canyon or
river, like,
something
really dark
earlier,
brown every
it's
time it
like
rains. It's
it is a significant. It's might be the Camden's Grand Canyon over at Lupin Terrace when you walk through that woods. I mean, it might be 15 feet deep of an eroded channel that's not supposed to be that way. And that HOA can't take care of that. They don't have the
Right.
financial wherewithal to
They
do
could
it. So
take their stormwater fund. But a lot of the time, the green space sometimes it's just, the responsibility is for it to be wild. It's not even
it's not maintained.
maintenance. It's like the maintenance is to make sure that you don't, we don't want the association to get together and decide to cut down all the trees because they want more sun. So
Right, this is a
sometimes,
specific purpose that
Mhm.
has
Yeah.
exceeded the
Or
capacity
like
of
with
the HOA.
Michael and Darby keeping it so it's not a buildable lot.
but there is a benefit, I'm saying, to town ownership, even in those cases where there's no maintenance responsibility. Because when you go and you look through and you're looking at the GIS or the maps and you say, oh, this is public property, then it's like the public is looking out for it. When it appears as private property, then a lot of times things get done to those parcels that are not in accordance with the original intent. And there's oftentimes a public benefit to these common areas. So when the public takes on the roads to say, okay, now we're going to take this private subdivision and pay for all of the roads forever, which is really expensive, we should be looking at that as an opportunity too, to say what additional public benefit can be derived from this. We've missed a lot of opportunities when on Norumbega Drive, they had an easement to the water, and the town should have said, we're not going to build a pump station there and take over that road without also getting that little path to the water. And that's their common area. So anyway.
So what is our next step?
I would just ask you to ask town staff to continue working with the HOA to prepare something to bring to you for the warrant to move this forward.
Done.
Okay.
Do we
Do
want
we
to
need
vote
a
on that?
vote
Maybe just-
or?
Sure, I'll take a vote. Would be great.
All right, can I have a motion to that effect to,
I move to direct town staff to work with the HOA to continue to make progress on bringing a vote to the June warrant.
Perfect.
Second.
Thank you.
any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Thank you.
Excellent.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you
Darby
very
and
much.
Michael.
Appreciate your patience and understanding of our
Likewise.
concerns here.
All right. our final item is discussion of regional communications dispatch options for FY 2026.
Excuse me, before we go
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry.
Don't we have to deal with the issue of 16?
Oh,
Bayview
right,
that was
right,
moved
right.
From a consent
Right,
agenda
you
to
are
an action
correct.
item?
You are correct. So as a discussion item,
It would
we
actually
can-
be an action item, shouldn't it be?
I think so.
right. It's an action item. So we need a motion to approve the license for 16 Bayview.
So moved for the purpose of discussion. Or
Okay,
if maybe somebody wants a second and then we
and a
can.
second.
A second.
Okay, any discussion?
How will we get to see the license documentation before we vote? And what is the impact if we don't vote on that this evening, but vote on that in the next, in the next meeting when we would be able to see the license?
Mhm.
Do you know when their licenses?
February 28th. And just for the record, you don't see the licenses every application. It's just a form that I give you that says the codes are signed off on it. That piece was missing in the packet. The only time you see the actual license applications is a new restaurant, but renewals you do not see.
Maybe that would be good to have. on
Yeah,
there.
so this is all part of the moving it online and also the new process that we have where, old businesses don't have to fill out the entire application every single time.
So given that the chief has,
I didn't put the form in this one time.
But-
I mean, I can,
But everything that would have gone into that form exists and says what it
yeah, I mean.
normally would.
as Chief Riley said, they did inspections, we got the state license and they paid the fee. That's basically.
so short of seeing the actual paperwork in front of us, we have confirmation from reliable sources that the inspections and the procedure has been followed and that their license expires this month.
But it's the 28th, so I guess it wouldn't actually make a
28th.
difference.
The end of it. You could actually put it on the next agenda, that's not going to impact.
Well, we've got a motion and a second.
I would think that it would be the smart thing to do to always have the document. We had almost 30% of the topics in tonight's discussion didn't have associated documentation that went with it. And we need to do a better job with that. Since this does not negatively impact 16 Bayview by approving this with whatever we normally see for documentation, I would rather see that we vote on it next time. I mean, it's a pretty easy thing. I just don't like the idea of voting on things without the documentation. Not that, granted, we've got attestation by a couple of people. One couldn't hear probably because of the no mic, stating that the documentation exists. I am not a fan of approving things without the documentation and details behind it.
I mean, normal is what we create. And so the fact that there is almost always documentation isn't a law. It's not in an ordinance. The fact that we approve these at all as a select board is an additional step beyond what some communities would do because there's a whole state approval process. So we're really just a check, one more level of control. So it's whatever we decide we need in order to feel comfortable with that. And I'm not disagreeing with you that many times it's very helpful to have the documentation, but it's not a violation of anything not to have it.
So we have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion?
I don't have any issues with postponing until the next meeting. I think that's
Postponing it?
reasonable. Until we see everything, even with the assurances we're given.
Okay.
It's fine with me.
I'm fine with that too.
I don't mind waiting. I'd prefer to see it in front of me.
Okay, so just to be procedural, we can vote to
I will withdraw my motion if I was the one that
Okay.
made it. And
All right, we'll do that and we'll postpone until our next meeting, our February 18th meeting.
I think that's good. I mean, if it were a case where we're going to be hurting their business at all, then
Right.
that's something else.
Okay, point taken. Let's let the chiefs do their report on dispatch.
So
Thank
I'll
you.
I'll kind of give the background to this. So I didn't include anything in the packet because this is really just a discussion at this point. And, any information that we have came from another community that really isn't ready for prime time yet. It's just an open discussion. So to give you some background, starting in August of 2024, Knox County Regional Communication Center, the dispatch center, informed everyone that they were down to critical staffing levels. I believe it was it 2 or 3 people at that time? Was it 3, maybe 3? And that as a result of being at such a, reduced number of staff that they were going to have to close. And so they were looking at, the 911 function going to Waldo County, which happened for a while. So there was 8 months where all of the 911 calls were routed to Waldo County, and then, Knox first responders were dispatched. So they were able to bring back staffing levels after that 8-month period to a point where they could accept 911 calls again, but we're now back kind of in the same situation that we were in summer of 2024, where we've got critical staffing levels. I think it was four people at the,
We think so.
maybe 4. So yeah, we're just kind of, this problem is, and this is not a problem that started in 2024. It's been going on for many, many years. Randy and Chris can sort of give you examples over the years of how this has been a problem, but it's really gotten to sort of critical levels over the past couple of years. And a lot of promises have been made by the county about fixing it that they just haven't seemed to pull together. So the largest community in Knox County, the city of Rockland, is at a point where they're looking at other alternatives, which would be standing up their own dispatch center. And they've invited Camden and Rockport, but I'm sure that this will extend to other communities in Knox County to look at the feasibility of that with them. So there was a meeting between the 3 towns a week ago where they went over what that would look like. So because it would be standing up a new center, and we have the infrastructure costs and the personnel costs, and the way that they've looked at it thus far, it's only the 3 communities. However, we're pretty certain that if Rockland did commit to this path forward, there'd be many more other than just the 3 of us that would participate. So, in the initial years, and if it's just a small number of communities, it would be a much higher cost than what we're paying now for Knox County Regional Communication Center. So, there's a number of, things that we need to weigh. But I think it's important for us to start seriously considering this option and really thinking about, what we want for that service, because it really isn't, as it's currently being run and managed, fulfilling the need that we needed to fulfill and the promise that the county made to us when all the communities got rid of our own little dispatch centers and worked on it regionally. Good summary?
Yeah, I think it's actually been longer. It wasn't just last summer. It's been about a year and a half.
Turn your mic, Randy.
So the summer of '23. So you've had the chair of the Knox County Commission come up here and speak with you to give you updates as to what's happened. It's like Groundhog Day. We're right back to where we were. Nothing's really changed. The personnel are down to critical staffing again. I couldn't sit here and tell you if and when it's going to go back to 911 at Waldo County, but those things are real and real possibilities that could happen at any time. We did meet last week. I can say that we had a meeting last Friday. I'll take my hat off to Mark Ratner. He sat there and took all the questions we threw at him really well. Looks like there has been some momentum and probably more things have changed, in my opinion, since Friday than we have seen in the last 18 months. They do have a new director that's hired there. I said at the meeting, I think it's only fair that we give them a couple of weeks to see what they can come up with. But we also have to be ready and be prepared that if it doesn't come to fruition that they can get the people, we're going to have to do something different. And that's probably going to be going with Waldo, Rockland, looking at setting something up and doing it quick. We may have to look for people to staff a center. We're not getting all the information we can at the times we need it. There are a lot of things working on the county's part of it right now to see what they can come up with. So I don't have a lot of answers. I don't know if Chris has got any more than I do, but it's real, it's happening, and we're kind of back where we were.
Brant, go ahead.
Is there in addition to the concern about the 911 calls, which is, obviously the most important function, is there somewhere where it's written down sort of what the expectations are for dispatch and what that service provides to the community? Because it feels like when calling dispatch, there's sometimes a misunderstanding about what their role would be from our perspective as opposed to their perspective. I'll give you an example. So someone who I spoke with, or actually wrote me about this, called to report, slippery roads, like an incident of black ice somewhere, which seems like, a lot of the time it is, we do have a system like that where the town can't be everywhere. I know you've told me I should call dispatch if there are cars parked on the sidewalk, things like that, because we pay for that service and that's their job. But is there something somewhere that writes up what is the responsibility of dispatch? What role do they play in the community? What are all the
Camden dispatch?
In general, yeah, I guess for Camden, for anything like the function of 211, different things, like what do we expect from
We pay the
dispatch?
county to do the emergency dispatching and the day-to-day business calls and whatnot. I mean, you can call Camden PD during the daytime, but their duty there is to do all of the dispatching and taking calls that come in for service, which could be critical service or mundane service.
So when we separate out the 911 versus non-911,
It's all the same. It all goes to the same dispatch center.
but didn't for
We had our own
when it went to,
dispatch
yes, I remember the good old days, and I would actually I liked that system. But when we talk about 911 being taken away or going to Waldo,
It's the 911 answering point is what it is. It's
what is
where-
the difference between that? So if 911 calls get transferred to Waldo, are there other non-911 calls that?
Regular business calls would still go to the dispatch center in Knox County.
Is that what was happening before when Waldo took over?
Yep. Their public safety answering point is what it is. It is what Waldo will be doing. They'll be taking when you call 911, it'll route to Waldo instead of going to Knox because there won't be an answering service for 911.
It will. Do you say will, like it's going to happen soon, or we don't? How do we know when you said, oh, we don't know if it's going to?
We don't. I can't tell
Who
you.
makes the decision whether Knox dispatch is
That'll be the
capable or not?
RCC and
What's that?
the RCC, the Regional Communication Center, and their directors.
Oh, they make the decision themselves.
The state.
The
Oh,
state
that's
will.
interesting.
If they get to a level where they can't provide the 911 service, then the state's going to step in and say that they're going to redirect those calls. And
How do they
Waldo has-
decide? Is there an evaluation? Is there somebody that inspects the facility, inspects records? Who is the overseer of quality for dispatch?
You were on the board.
Like I know with the EMS contract, sometimes we say you're expected to respond within this amount of time, and you look at this and you see how they're doing. How do we evaluate dispatch?
So, so I think you asked about expectations, right? When I talked with the director today, I think part of the problem is that there's a lot of qualifications that a person sitting in the RCC needs to have, right? There's some certain state certifications they need to have to use the equipment, and there's specific ones to law enforcement. So they're making sure that information is kept confidential. So the director told me today, there should be like a 16-week training plan, and he saw a 4-week one today. So I think that goes to sort of your expectations, right? If the staff aren't being.
I don't know, though. I don't know what's the standard, or does it say something in a contract, or?
Sure, but
yeah,
if there's supposed to be a 16-week training plan, but they're only getting 4 weeks, they're not getting the expectations delivered to them, right?
Right. And I don't know. I don't get any training, so I don't know if my expectations are reasonable or not.
And I'd say in terms of oversight, it's one of those things where the state licensed them to be a public safety answering point, but they really leave it to them to kind of self-manage, and they only get involved when it's a problem. Like in the case of Knox County, it was the county coming to the state saying, we can no longer be the PSAP. We need it to be transferred to Waldo County.
So they get a license to do this, and then it just goes on forever unless they say they're having trouble, and then.
I mean, they have to meet criteria.
What are the
By
criteria?
the state to be able to be a public safety answering point. So they have to follow the state guidelines of staffing, training, and things like that.
The technology.
Equipment, yeah. I
Yeah.
mentioned.
Randy, can you give us a bit of a comparison to what the good old days were? What was the difference, and when was it that around, because you saw both of these, around when was it that Camden had its own service, and what services did you have? I mean, did you go 24 hours?
We moved
or-
into the public safety building from up here in 2003, and we still had our own dispatch then. We had 4 dispatchers. They worked 12-hour shifts, 4 days a week, 4 days on, 4 days off, 24-hour coverage. Back then, there was a big push to regionalize everything. The county communications center had been put up. The fire departments were using it at that point. We still kept our police dispatch. It was also when E911 was coming into play, and there was only going to be so many what they call PSAPs, public safety answering points, I think that's what it's called. So they were regulating those, and those were basically going to the county communications center. So we lost our 911 because it went to the center down there. What you lost when we lost our dispatchers here is the local Camden knowledge. We had dispatchers that some had been born and raised here, so they had that. We had 24-hour coverage, so anybody could walk in 24 hours a day and see somebody. But there was a big push to try and save money, and regionalization was one of those things. It's probably still cheaper now to go through the county dispatch than it would be to have. Well, I think if you were to start your own dispatch here, say just Camden alone, you'd need 5 people. You'd need 4 people to run it.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a supervisor supervising over that as well to make sure that the standards are all met, the trainings and whatnot.
As well as the equipment.
As the equipment. I mean, we could run a dispatch in an emergency situation out of here if we needed to, but we don't have that equipment's all 2003 era. So there's much better equipment out there now. Quite honestly, we own a part of that dispatch center down there. So.
Why do you feel more confident, if it is the case, that to go and do something with Rockland as compared to doing something with a county? Why would there be greater confidence in that?
I guess what I'm going to say is our bill is paid until July.
Okay.
We should take a look and see what's going to happen in the next few weeks, few months. But we also ought to be preparing to, in the case that closes down and we need to do something quick. I know Chief Whitetalk, Chief Carroll, Chief Beasley, Farley, and I all met. I think Rockland would put up a good service, but I think everybody's going to have an issue with finding the help to staff that.
Right, because as you said,
There's
that was
wall-
the issue before, that was how long it takes for the
Right.
training
Right. Oh, yeah,
program
it's a
to
big
get
thing.
somebody.
Just to give you an idea. So since 20, and this is the new director gave me this statistic. The new director of the Regional Communication Center. Since 2012, they've gone through 47 staff members there. So there's some management problems. There's some staff problems. And the city of Rockland, they've had much better success in managing and retaining staff overall.
How many are there? I mean, if there are 47, how many are there typically?
For full staffing?
Yeah, what's the
I
amount?
think
you
the
know?
full staff is 12 and the director, I believe.
This was not an
They've
unknown
never
problem
been.
there.
And we're down to 4 again right now or something.
Can I ask, when Waldo County was handling 911 first, what was your impression of the level of service they provided?
So my level with dispatch is different than the fire and EMS. We don't need the amount of dispatch that fire and EMS does because their issues are larger scale for the most part. So when we call and they answer, we also have mobile data terminals in our cruisers. So our officers can actually run license plates. They can run driver's license. They can be pretty self-sufficient. When we get to a scene, most of the time it's contained in that scene. So we don't need a lot of dispatch traffic. I didn't have any issue. 911 was going through Waldo, but the calls were then transferred down to Knox because they still were a functioning center. They just weren't taking the 911 calls. So the center did not close down. It just lost the 911.
And Chief Farley, you think you received good service from Waldo? Like at that during that time, it was still speedy. It was still all the information you needed to do your job.
Right, like Randy said, we were, if you were to stand out here today and dial 911, your call's going to get answered in Rockland. So when they changed it over and you stood out here, your call got answered in Belfast. They took the necessary information and then they transferred it down to Rockland and it was dispatched by staff down here. What we're looking at now is that whole cycle being looked at or being taken care of in Waldo County.
And that's my question for you. Like, we're on the Waldo County line here. Are we a little bit of a free agent come July? I mean,
We should
get what you're saying.
rejoin Waldo County. Camden used to be part of Waldo County, the entire town.
So let me say this. Waldo County did us a great service by helping out with the 911. They still have a whole county of their own. I have not talked to anybody at Waldo County to say, hey, would you be able to take Camden's dispatch over? I don't know what they would be able to do, but they're going to be taking a lot if they're taking Knox and Waldo County. So it'd be a conversation. But I totally agree. You could look around. Radio range wise, I don't think, somebody like Lincoln they'd be too far out. I'm not that into my
What?
radio.
Lincolnville?
Lincoln County.
Oh.
Yeah.
I went to, a couple of years ago, I went to several meetings with Waldo County commissioners. They were so receptive, so easy to work with. It's a stark contrast to the Knox County Commission.
At the time,
Mostly
it's
different
changed a lot.
people now, though.
At the
So
time.
it's,
And like Randy said, I think we need to give the two new commissioners, the new director and the new administrator, an opportunity until later sometime this month. But Waldo County stepped up to the plate and they filled in where Knox County didn't a couple of years ago. And they're ready to do it again. And I appreciate that. And
that would be, like you said, let's give it a chance, but we have until July. I would say, in my opinion, is we ought to ask Audra to have a conversation with somebody at Waldo County and find out if that's an acceptable thing to them. Obviously, we'd be paying them. It would add to their budget, but we are on the Waldo County line and apparently they have a history of providing good service.
But is Rockland going to go ahead regardless, or are they waiting as well to see how the commissioners proceed in the next few weeks?
They're making contingency plans and they're getting ready to implement them if Knox County is not able to produce in the next couple of weeks.
Because they've still got to train staff and buy equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not immediate. I mean, they're not flipping the switch on this in the next couple of weeks.
Several years ago when I was talking to some of the Waldo County commissioners, to your point, at the time they said, this might be the first steps in a joint county communication center. And, maybe that's still where we end up if.
So this could happen faster than,
What would
if
be
they
your
lose somebody
preference?
else.
What's your preference? Good dispatch. I guess you don't,
Well, my experience is in the fire service started out in a fire mutual aid system in New Hampshire that served the capital area. I think it serves 28 communities over 4 counties and a population of 150,000.
Mhm.
So I know a regional communication center could work. It hasn't worked in Knox County because there was never a vision plan. There was never a vision for the center from day one. They never had a good solid plan put out there, and they've never addressed the longstanding problems.
and this has been no surprise. Chris started sounding the alarm. He was on the advisory committee and started sounding the alarm about the problems there 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
I think 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
so the-
overall with the county, it's
Yeah.
that, it's, they don't invest enough money in planning and administration, and there's just not enough. It's not like counties in other places where there's a lot of the regional planning. Why don't we have public transportation in Knox County? Why don't we have a lot of things? What we have are all these little towns doing our own little thing. And, why are we having trouble getting the fire stuff all working together? Normally, you'd have county government really taking a strong role in these regional efforts, but instead we plan our transfer station with like the 3 towns closest to us and all of these municipal efforts because of the vacuum of the county. And I don't know how to fix that larger issue.
well, and I think we can't underestimate that dispatch is a very stressful, super demanding position.
Yes.
And I think that nationally, that, I've watched documentaries about it, and it is the type of thing that the burnout rate is really high. And, people take a lot of abuse as dispatchers, and
But many
So
things
it's
have
not
been
an
brought
easy
to their
job to-
attention that could have eased a lot of that. There
What's
has
that?
been-
Start-
There is, it's been brought to the county's attention many times.
yeah.
That there were issues within that needed to be addressed, and they weren't addressed.
Mhm.
And that has been the constant theme. Now, we have some new people in there, and Mark is doing a great job of trying to get some things done. There's been some movement. Where that ends up, I don't know. It could be that personnel issues cause it that the dispatch center has to go. The 911 part of it has to go to the county, Waldo County, quicker than we think. I don't know where their staffing levels are now.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that we really can't discuss here because it might involve personnel matters that we're not privy to. We hear what everybody else hears.
Now, is an advantage of having the E911 and the dispatchers essentially in the same room, isn't that an advantage on continuity of the call? That is, I thought I remember that was a concern back last summer when the E911 would then have to change over to the dispatcher, and that becomes an issue. However, if we were in the same building in Waldo.
That puts an extra step in it. When 911 rings in Belfast and they have to call down and transfer the information, that's a legitimate point that it's going to slow down some.
It's continuity, and we can see the time that the call gets answered and then the time we get the information. And when it was no fault of it being in Waldo County, but just
Right.
the way the information gets transferred,
That's what I was saying. If we moved
There's a
over
significant amount of time.
both elements of that service instead of, if we're in the case where we have to have Waldo County, but we still have the dispatchers over here in Knox County, we have the continuity issue as compared with if they were doing it all
I'm
over
gonna
there
be-
in Waldo.
Just my own opinion.
Yeah.
If you lose dispatch 911 services twice, I don't think you're going to get them back.
Hmm.
Now, maybe a new model going forward, and you'll be able to talk to the state. And I think that's what Mark was referring to tonight, is that he and the director are going to the state. They're going to let them know what's going on and what they need to do. So I think we need to give that a little time, but we can't sit here and wait and then July come up and then all of a sudden it's gone and we haven't done any due
We
diligence
still
with the
need to look
plan.
at some contingency
We
plans.
owe it to our citizens to be prepared for the worst thing to happen. And that's what we need to do.
So I feel like we hear a lot about dispatch from the perspective of public safety officials, and that is important. But there's a different experience too, which is the experience that residents have when they call. And I feel like there's been no opportunity to have that conversation about when you call for either non-emergency or non-emergency, that's like our front-facing public relations
Absolutely.
in a lot of ways. And what's been frustrating to me is that I feel like there's so much value that public calls can have, that say for instance, somebody suspects a drunk driver, somebody sees a dangerous condition, somebody, just sees something that they're concerned about and they call for that reason. The experience that person has is really important, whether they feel, and what I've heard a lot is that people feel like, oh, I tried to call and report this and it felt like they didn't want that information. And so I feel like collectively we just miss out on that huge benefit. And so that's where I would like to make sure that
when you contract out for those services, you lose that control of controlling those personnel.
Well,
Because
I feel like there are ways that we could control it by.
Absolutely. If you're going to contract out for dispatch service, you put performance objectives in there of what
Right.
the town wants, what the town expects. And if those objectives aren't met, then there's a formula for dealing with that.
Similar to what we did when we enhanced the contract with Northeast Mobile Health. We were having issues and the contract got enhanced. And a lot of those issues were resolved.
I think a lot of
I want people to hear, thank you for calling. Thank you for letting us know that there's glare ice here. We need that. Things, and there might be disagreement sometimes about what is a reasonable call and what's a not reasonable call and what they can handle and what they can't. So I just feel like there needs to be a process of being on the same page so that we can tell our residents, yes, it is helpful when you call this number to report, X, Y, and Z.
But if we're going in a new direction with dispatch, I think what's happened over the years is we get a bill from the county every year. Can't really argue what it is, and we just pay for the service because that's what we chose to do years ago, was to give up our service. If somebody had called back in the day when we had our own service and they got somebody that was rude to them, it could have been handled immediately in-house. We don't have that option now.
Well, I would say also, like, there is a board that was supposed to provide oversight of the dispatch center, made up of representatives from towns across Knox County. Chief Farley was on that board for how many years? The community?
10 or 12.
10 or 12 years.
Beating my head on the wall.
And I guess they were just given it was like an advisory board. They were given no sort of formal role or oversight or anything like that. So a lot of them, when they started to see these problems, or the problems have existed for as 20 years or something, and just have gotten worse and worse and worse. Everybody who was involved in that board brought these issues up with the leadership at the county, and there just wasn't
No fault.
resolution. So I think that's kind of something going forward, is if you're going to have an oversight board, allow them to provide oversight and give them some tools to do that. And that was never done.
And then I think, Allison, what you're saying, probably needs to be looked at in terms of putting in some objectives, some benchmarks that they need to achieve. And I'm not making excuses, but there's only 2 people working in that center at a time. And I can imagine sometimes being short with people on the phone.
Oh, I can certainly understand being short with residents occasionally. That's,
I'm not saying that's acceptable, but I think.
But when there isn't even agreement about, like, I see comments sometimes that are like, people need to stop complaining about dispatch because they don't understand this and this. And I see signs of real burnout. So I have like empathy, but I worry about the idea that, just an advisory board with a little more power is going to solve the problem. That's like saying, the select board is going to solve things by, ultimately it comes down to a hierarchy of good management. And does the county have a new administrator?
Yes.
And there's a new director at the dispatch center as well.
New county administrator, a new director, and
Okay.
2 new commissioners.
I'd like to see,
Yeah.
us basically give the support to Audra and her staff to investigate the best options and take a little bit of time to do it, obviously, because there's a situation developing both at Knox County and in Rockland, but not to rule out Waldo County as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that, obviously it's a work in progress right now. If we're to believe that Mark Ratner feels like there's momentum and some real possibility for positive change, but you guys are really where the rubber hits the road. If you feel like the services, you're getting word in a timely way to get your service out where it's needed. So if we're just kept apprised of how things are developing over the next few weeks and months before the bill comes due, and then we'll have to sort that out when we get our tax bill
But we have to budget ahead of
from
time now.
Knox County, right?
So I feel like we should be setting aside, as much as we don't want to do it, we should be prepared to, in the case that we would have to spend more.
Well, and this is sort of one of the reasons we thought it was really important to come to you all at this point in time, because I think, all of us are hopeful. Like, Mark takes this very seriously. He's known it's a problem. Like you said, it's the reason he ran for county commission. There's a lot of new people who know it's a problem. So we want to have confidence in them that they're taking it seriously and they're going to do something about it. But I think it was important to us that you all knew about it. So going into the budget season, we were able to sort of look at other options and get ideas. Like, Tom saying, go look at Waldo County, which is a great idea and way for us to prepare. So I think, it's more of just raising the awareness, getting ideas from you all, and, just informing you that this might be something that we kind of took for granted as kind of being a steady, this is what it is, and we accept it every year, to something where we need to completely reimagine how we do this.
My needs for the police department, I don't care who does the dispatching. I need to know that when my officers call, somebody's going to answer that radio. And they're going to take the information when somebody calls, and it's going to be the correct information. And they're not going to be put on hold or whatever. We owe it to our employees. We owe it to our citizens to give the best quality dispatch we can. Like I said, our police, when we have a situation going on, if it's whatever it is, we just need somebody there to answer that radio. Be it in Rockland, which I think we would have a great partnership with Rockland PD and Rockland Fire if they set up a dispatch. I think we'd have the same relationship with Waldo County. Waldo would have to be willing to be able to take on all that other responsibility. And I think it's worth the conversation. I think we need to look at all options. And this is the time to do that.
And then I think we need to do what you said, Allison, in terms of putting some performance objectives together as well, so that whoever's providing the service has some.
I feel like we should ask people, when was the last time you called 911 or dispatch in any way, and what was your experience? And it would be, this is an area for citizen input. And I see people making faces a little bit as if it's like, but that really matters. Like, we have a responsibility to make that service, like, it can be, what I hear from people a lot of the time, if they can get to a police officer or firefighter and they can talk to that person, it's a really positive experience. But it oftentimes doesn't feel like there's a way to do that, because if you call your like route, it's like this inconvenience a little bit. There should be some protocols that say, these are other ways to they're on calls right now, but you can contact them this way. Or it's just to get information out about how people can contact, the right entity is, I think, a really overlooked part.
I think the new director, I think, has a fair amount of experience in the field. He's also part of an ambulance service accreditation process. So he's in dispatch centers around the country. And, part of any accreditation process is getting community feedback. So hopefully that's something that he can develop as well in the future, is getting community feedback.
We've all of us the other day have offered our support and to help to have the dispatch center in Knox County come back and thrive. They've got a lot of work that they need to do to get that going. And we just can't sit around and wait in case it doesn't. To your point of people calling dispatch and not having a great result, for those of us who've had the same cell phone number for as long as cell phones have been out and people get it, I get more calls on my own phone from people because they've either called and didn't have a pleasant
Yeah, because you tell me to
response.
call and then they're like, act like it's not the right thing to do.
And that's what we pay for, is that service. So when it's broken, we need to fix it when we've got the
Okay.
opportunity to do that. So we're all on board, willing to help them out as much as we can. We have been since day one. I think there was some reluctancy to take our help. I say if the county gets to the point where they come to say that we need your help now, then we really need to have a hard discussion about what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think some of this is good feedback, and I think, we need to go into it thinking maybe the way it all happens is reimagined. There's got to be some better ways.
So Susan, or whoever, I have a general question about the funding. I don't know how it works at the county level, but they have an emergency system. We do pay the county for services, but the dispatch is separate from, we're going to be providing funding to the county anyway. This contract is separate from the funds so that we are free to choose other dispatch.
Yeah, we're not obligated to Knox County to take their service for dispatch because they're a
I'm just
separate
wondering
entity.
if
There's
we're
still
already paying for the services.
There's still an E911 fee, user fee, that will have to be paid to whoever is the answering point for that. So, yeah,
It's broken out of, we have like our county tax that we pay and then the fee for dispatch or communication center.
That's a good question. I wondered about that too. Is it truly completely separate? It can't be, because some of the same, like our county
It's
taxes
not-
are paying for the administrator. And so
Right.
there's some,
Yeah. It's like saying the wastewater is completely separate from if you're a Camden taxpayer and there's always going to be a little bit.
we make a pretty good effort though. Did we charge?
Yeah.
Does a portion of the county administrator and all of that get charged to dispatch?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Never heard that. I don't believe so.
So yeah, we are paying, even if we don't use the service.
We're paying.
But in my opinion, that's minor.
Yeah,
The most important concern is that we have good, consistent, professional service, even.
Yeah. Absolutely.
less than
Okay,
ideal.
keep us apprised.
Thank you so much for this, because it's really important. And I think we got a lot of good ideas from you all on how to, prepare ourselves, but also give the county some grace to let the new blood that's come in fix the problem.
If there was any vagueness on our parts, it's because there are a lot of moving parts there. It's some of the stuff I don't think would be appropriate for us to discuss in this forum, but we are attending the meetings. We are doing what we can. We are offering our advice to Mark, the new director, and we'll continue to do that. But we need to go into this with a secondary plan in case.
Well, thank you for going at it as a matter of being prepared, because as we know, the best plans can go awry. So by being prepared for the contingencies, that's terrific.
I was prepared to buy redundant cell phones the last time and
Great.
issue them to everybody so they could call 911 and they could direct call. right
if
to
you
the
could just
cruisers.
direct call a police officer, there, a lot of the time, that's a great thing.
That's what we were going to do. We were going to put cell phones
Okay.
that would ring redundant for everybody that was working. So if 911 came in, it would go right to the cell phone in the cruiser. So we've had the opportunity to think of many different ideas with this. So I'm in hopes that it works, but
Gentlemen, thank you
cautiously
as
optimistic,
always.
I guess is
Thank
how
you
I'll
as
leave it.
always.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion, objections? Let's do it.
Nice seeing you.
It's good to be back. Thank you.